And we're going to ask the mayor to go through those, recognizing that there is transition going on in the department, but that you did provide answers to some of those that joined the call.
Yes, I sent over the response to those questions. And so I want to thank Council for the opportunity. I want to first start by stating that Council has provided, as the Council President has said, a number of written questions regarding police policy and tactics. Chief Singletary has provided the written answers to those questions, and I believe that I have provided that to the Council's staff, and I'm hopeful that he sent that over to you all. Unfortunately, there is not a member of the RPD command staff that is available to answer the questions. So if you have any additional follow-up questions, I will send those to Chief Singletary. I do also want to thank and again share my gratitude to Reverend Myra Brown for working with me and everyone and our elders and our ministers and everyone that came out to help de-escalate actions and to provide an opportunity for those speaking out to do so peacefully. I also want to take a moment to apologize to City Council, the 8 members of City Council and Council President, because you were not fully briefed on this matter at any point in time before the video came out, fully briefed the 8 members of Council. And so I definitely want to apologize to you all, and I will answer what questions that I can. If you want to go through question by question, I will ask that BJ read the answers to those questions into the record.
Okay.
I'm happy to do that if you'd like that to happen, President Scott.
So you all probably didn't get a chance to read the answers, is that right, colleagues? Okay, so we can go through them.
The first question was, provide the written protocol for when RPD responds to mental health calls. How or when and how often does RPD engage mental health providers to join the call? And the response is, members of the Rochester Police Department, when dealing with persons during contact on the street, as well as during interviews and interrogations, will be understanding of and attentive to the problems of persons experiencing mental or emotional difficulties and who may require police assistance and community health and community mental health resources. Members of the RPD will use judgment based on training, experience, and discretion when exercising their powers of arrest under New York State mental hygiene law without compromising member, patient, and/or public safety. Members of the RPD making a mental hygiene arrest or returning individuals to a mental health facility pursuant to NYSMHL, which is New York State mental health law, will share all potentially relevant information surrounding the individual's conduct and/or arrest with hospital personnel involved in the evaluation of the person. Evaluation by police. Section 9.41 of the NYSMHL allows a police officer to take into custody any individual for evaluation if the person appears to be mentally ill and is conducting themselves in a manner which is likely to result in serious harm to themselves or others when there is substantial risk of physical harm to 1, themselves as manifested by threats of or attempts of suicide or serious bodily harm, or other conduct demonstrating that they are dangerous to themselves, such as the person's refusal or inability to meet their essential needs for food, shelter, clothing, or health care, provided that such refusal or inability is likely to result in serious harm if there is not immediate hospitalization, or 2, other persons as manifested by homicidal or other violent behavior by which others are placed in reasonable fear of serious physical harm. Or 3, there is reasonable suspicion that an individual's behavior, whether or not criminal in nature, is secondary to a mental health issue. Relative to the above attachments, General Order 561 Crisis Intervention Team, activations are covered on page 4 under section 4, which is a document that is submitted, and General Orders 560 Psychiatric Intervention, covers the procedures for conducting 9.41 mental hygiene arrests, MHAs, to include transports, paperwork, hospital procedures, if there are criminal charges, and escapes. Additionally, covers the other types of MHAs that are less frequent. So that was the response to the first question.
So clearly, though, in the next question will be a little bit different, but for what we have been sent in the mail, I'm not sure we'll be able to read through the full response for each of those, because some are the policies and there are numerous sections to them, and we can read those. We can sort of summarize that they are attached for those things that you don't have the additional answers to, or we can keep going and see how best it works. But I'm saying that's not going to work for us to read through the entire policy that is the response to some of these that we've asked. And we need to have an opportunity to read it ourselves.
That was certainly the longest of them.
Okay, so go to the next question, please.
Number 2, what has been the specific plan for RPD to de-escalate during protests? How are we avoiding escalation to begin with? And the response is, due to the inherent officer and public safety risk created by providing specific details to how and where RPD deploys officers in the event of unlawful assembly or riotous behavior, we are unable to provide counsel with those plans in a public forum. However, RPD has implemented multiple measures throughout the planning stages to ensure that officers are standing behind barricades, interlocked gates, away from protesters, that communication with the field command and command post is open and utilized often so that information and orders can be relayed in real time, that a smaller show of officers assigned to the protest events are visual to the general public, that supervisors across the chain of command understand the strict command of not escalating the situation by encountering or addressing every individual who chooses to disrupt the peaceful protests, for example, exercising restraint, and that orders to advance towards the protest crowd and enforce dispersal warnings will only be used as a last resort measure to protect the safety of our officers and this community. The third question, the council is incredibly concerned about the use of pepper balls on protesters and the lack of compliance with protocol when they are used. There are eyewitness accounts by council members who were struck by pepper balls directly and not from ricochet. How can the footage of police response be viewed or be reviewed, and what is the plan to address specific officers found to have directly fired at citizens? The response: as has always been our practice, City Council can set up a time to review police camera footage. In addition, citizens may request video footage utilizing the City of Rochester's FOIL process. If an individual believes that an officer used the pepper ball launching system, or PLS, in a manner that did not adhere to the RPD's policies and procedures, they may file a complaint at the Professional Standards Section Office.
President Scott, are we going to be asking questions as we go along here, or do you want to wait for the whole thing to be read?
Let's just go through what we've asked for and then see how much time we've got left, because we gave some thought to the questions.
Okay.
The ability to get the detailed answers is compromised by not having police present. So we're going to work with this to the extent that we can.
Okay.
The fourth question was provide a copy of the material safety data sheet for the pepper balls used by RPD and list any long-term effects. There is an attachment containing the standard operating procedure for pepper ball launching system, and attached is the manufacturer's manual. The fifth question, RPD declared the protests an unlawful assembly. How and when does a protest become an unlawful assembly? The response, New York State Penal Law Section 240-10, unlawful assembly. A person is guilty of unlawful assembly when he assembles with 4 or more other persons for the purpose of engaging or preparing to engage with them in tumultuous or violent conduct likely to cause public alarm, or when being present at an assembly which either has or develops such purpose, he remains there with intent to advance that purpose. Unlawful assembly is a Class B misdemeanor. An unlawful assembly is declared when there is a demonstrated risk to the public, i.e. the throwing of hard objects, fireworks, arson, etc., which would lead the department to believe both demonstrators and officers may face injury or worse. Regarding the second part of the question, regarding Saturday night, who specifically made the decision and how is it not an infringement on free speech to make and this is in reference to the declaration of unlawful assembly. How close was this declaration of unlawful assembly to the shift change for officers? The response: this decision is made based upon the actions of the crowd, the reports, information coming in from supervisors in the field, and ultimately decided by the RPD command post. Since the start of last week's protests, our officers have been largely mandated to work 12 to 16-hour shifts. Therefore, traditional shift change times are not valid and would not have been a factor. The next portion of this question: after an unlawful assembly is declared, how soon after a crowd has been dispersed can people begin exercising their right to protest? The response: once the scene of the event is made safe or the demonstrated risk is mitigated, protesters have the ability to reconvene in a lawful manner. Question 6. We would like to see the charges dropped for any individual charged with unlawful assembly. The response: the arrests made were lawful. If you would like to advocate for the charges to be dropped, I would contact District Attorney Sandra Dorley. Question 7. How can someone be charged with inciting a riot if no riot occurs? The response: New York State Penal Law, Section 240.08, inciting to riot. A person is guilty of inciting to riot when he urges 10 or more persons to engage in tumultuous and violent conduct of a kind likely to create public alarm. Inciting a riot is a Class A misdemeanor. Question 8. How can officers have their badge numbers and names covered? This occurred on multiple occasions, and numerous instances of photographic evidence are available on social media posts. The response: for the past couple of months, officers' names have been researched by protesters to put personal information out to the public, putting the safety of their families in jeopardy. Officers have been allowed to remove their name tags in an effort to prevent their personal information from being spread on social media. Question 9. We want to be provided written assurances that no bearcats, tanks, dogs, or artifacts of war be used on our citizens and those protesting. The response: the RPD has not used any, quote, bearcats, tanks, dogs, or any artifacts of war, end quote. And the final question was a request to have a daily, which has been rephrased to regular public briefing held on Zoom with the council, mayor, and other relevant administrative staff to address questions and concerns of the council.
Okay, so now
Those answers were submitted by RPD Chief LaRon Singletary.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilmember Patterson.
Colleagues, Madam Mayor, I find the failure of whomever is running the RPD to attend this briefing totally unacceptable. I have questions that I want answers from the folks who made the decisions. True, you are ultimately accountable for their actions, but it is deeply disturbing that whomever is in charge of the RPD today